divided into 5 major techniques, can be clustered into 5 major techniques. Number 1 is the survey techniques. Survey techniques here allow you to actually to cater for the end users' needs and so on. So inside the survey techniques listed here is interview and questionnaire. If you are dealing with some things that related to the common use of the software, and you want to reach out of the user, a range of user, then it's better for you to get a questionnaire in order to get the overview of the system features that needed by the user. However, we can have a technique that is interview, that you identify the interviewees, stakeholders, normally is the stakeholders, and you conduct interviews, whether it's a closed interview or open-ended interview. For the closed interview, you have to actually get ready of a list of questions. The list of questions is coming from the studies, maybe that is an architect, that is a documentations review for the previous systems. You go through the existing systems, functions, and so on in order to set out a set of questions that you want to ask during the interview. Closed interview allows you to have a predefined questions, and you can actually use the predefined questions in order to get the things that you want. And open-ended questions are often used for getting the informations that out of the context that you allowed the interviewee to give their points of view related to the system, related to the strengths and weaknesses of the system that are normally used and so on. For open-ended interview, you are going to get a numbers of answer or a numbers of the requirements that are not in the list. Okay, that is not in the list, and you have to actually later on you have to verify it with the existing or the possibility of implementing. Okay, so normally if you deal with the domain knowledge, domain expert, okay, domain expert, somehow the closed interview won't help you to get the information that you want, because it's the limitations of the terminology, the process to do, what are the things that normally in the process, and so on. Okay, so that is related to the survey techniques. Okay, the first one. For the second one here, we cluster it as a creativity techniques. Okay, creativity techniques here can be subdivided into 4 main types here. If you notice it, we can have a brainstorming paradox, change of perspective, and analogy. Okay, so for the brainstorming always we come across when we want to do something, but we don't have any of the idea really want to do the things or not. So we are gather some, we say that more heads, more heads is better than one head. So meaning that, okay, we gather the people, okay, that interested in the area or have a knowledge in the area. Is that someone want to come in? Ada orang nak masuk ke? Sekejap, wait ya. That's all. Sorry. Okay. So then we brainstorm to the ideas that getting the requirements. Brainstorm the idea, getting the requirements, and so on. But during you to have a ground study, okay, to have a ground study about the system, to have a ground studies about the potential functionality that should contain inside the systems and so on, so that you can react as a moderator, react as a moderators in order to start the brainstorming session. So in the brainstorming sessions, you have to guide your participants in order to brainstorm about the system rather than other things and so on. Same things go to the brainstorm paradox. When brainstorming, we are highlighting the functions, we are highlighting the wow factors, we are highlighting some things that related, that were going to be beneficial and going to have a competitive factors on the system or on the applications that we want to build. Okay, others than that is opposite for the brainstorming paradox. When we talk things that the users do not want to see, some unnecessary things inside the system, some those in the system and so on. So that is the other way around. We are brainstorming about a system, however, now we are brainstorming about some things that is unnecessary inside the system. So somehow we want to get rid of these kinds of unnecessary requirement, so that our systems is light enough when it's go live and so on. So and it's better and it's not that messy for the users to actually, in the first glance, it look like clean, simple, easy to use and so on. So that's why somehow you can use brainstorming paradox in order to brainstorm that unnecessary requirement, or somehow is the requirement that is not preferable by the client or by the systems and so on. Okay, so the third one here is change of perspective, meaning that when you have a group of stakeholders, you have a group of stakeholders inside the system, and you want to actually have sessions with them. Okay, so when we have a system, or we have a group of stakeholders, and you try to actually ask them to think from the other way or the other perspective of it. Okay, maybe it is actually the stakeholders is in the HR department. Okay, so you might ask him or her after the first round. You might ask him or her from the other perspective. Okay, let's say what you are going to do when you are in the financial department. What are the things that you want to see inside the system and so on? Meaning that we are using some creative way in order to gather the requirement that will bring us to the different business system, and also the desire of the user. Okay, what they want to for you. This is creative techniques that you can use in order to gather some requirement. Okay, so the last one here is analogy. Analogy here is better for you to when it deal with some client that is totally not in the computer field, or totally not in the field that related to the computing area and so on. So that's why some terminology will be so we call it is a very new thoroughly together the requirement. Let's say you want to build out a security layer. Okay, you dealing with the clients that do not know anything about network terminology and so on. So you might put the analogy of security layer. Okay, if you have a parameters, then you have a firewalls. Okay, you have applications login. Then you have a database login and so on. Might explain it as a physical fans. Okay, inside the house you have physical fans. Then after that you can have an emperor a door access to the house. Then after enter the house you have another a cabinet with a lock. Then after that you have file inside and so on. So that is the things that we are using the analogy in order to let the clients know some to explain it to them and what are the things that we need to gather from them. Okay, so this is how some creativity techniques can be used. Is that okay so far? I'm going too fast. Boleh dengar ke? Okay.
Okay.
Boleh. All right. Thank you very much for the feedback. Okay, the third one here, we call it observations of ethnography. Observations, you might very, it's in common terms, we call it observation. Observe lah, observe. That means you go for the site and you sit down and you try to observe, you try to do the ethnography techniques. That means observations techniques. The site, go to the fields that people using the existing systems, sit down there, look at them, how they're going to operate the system, how they're going to use the existing system in order to register for the end user, in order to get some orders, in order to get some print out the receipt and so on. Okay, so need some observation. We cluster it as observations or ethnography techniques. Okay, inside these techniques, there are few other techniques, okay, that can be grouped together. Number one is field observations, meaning that you go to the site, okay, after you have interview, after you have conversations with the end user, with the clients. Now it's time for you to sit down, operating things, how people use the system, how people are going to actually do the process for the data and so it needs you to spend quite we call it period of time in order to sit down to see to observe what is going on, how people use it, what are the things that normally people do it, because during the interview or during the survey people might tend to hide something because of some issues and so on. But during the field observations, they are doing the things that usually they have. If you conduct the interview, you already get the requirement from the stakeholders, from your clients. Now is the time for you to verify it, so-called during the field observation. Next here that you can use is actually a parenthesing. Parenthesing here is become you yourself become a parenthesis to the task, meaning that you follow the user, you follow the end user to when they are doing their task, you are following them and you are doing actually the task. You are doing the task. You ask them to teach you how to do the task. So you are experiencing, have a hands-on how system is going on. When the clients, when customers come to the counter, what was going to do when the task, when the sitting there as a parenthesis in order to operate the system, feel the system by yourself. Okay, this is one of the techniques under the observations or ethnography, so that you can have a hands-on and experience how people doing things with the existing systems and so on. Okay, that is the second thing here. The third one here, we call it contextual inquiry. Contextual inquiry actually allows you to have before the interview beforehand, getting the informations that you want, okay? And during the sessions of the observations or ethnography, so you are going to actually asking the things from time to time, okay, from time to time, in the user context. When they're doing the tasks, okay, let's say the data entry, you already have the informations, but during the users and on, again, you asking them based on the task. Okay, what is the things that want to, what are the things they want to gather from the customers, what are the things that make them have to really pay attention to the system, okay, and how they operate the system and so on. It's a contextual inquiry while the user using the system, and you are asking the questions in order to verify something for the requirements. So that is the third one inside observation. The last one here is a focus ethnography. Focus ethnography is very important that before you start your ethnography session, observation session, you have to see what are the problems that you want to solve. What are the problems or what are the things that you want to analyze? Okay, let's say is actually some production line having the problems and so on. Okay, so you already have beforehand the problems that you want to focus. Okay, the problems that you want to solve, the things that you want to analyze. Then you can have set out a focus ethnography, study what will be the culture, what will be the habits, what will be the process, what will be the normal flows, what will be the exception flow during that periods of time in the focus group. Okay, meaning that you know that in the production line, some of the operators actually having some problems, complained by the company and so on. So that will be your focus group that you have to see that, okay, you want to solve the problem. Why the operators didn't use the system in order to increase the products during the production lines and so on. So you are going to sit there, you are going to actually study the habits of operations, the normal flow of the operations, and so on. So this one we call it focus ethnography. Okay, so focus ethnography, again, I would like to say observations ethnography techniques actually needs time. Okay, is a period of time that you have to sit at the site in order to know the how the users practically use the system. Okay, right. So the second last one here is the document-centric techniques. When we talk about document-centric, it's based on the document, okay? Whatever documentations that can give to you by the company, that can give to you by your client, okay? So the first one, we have a system archaeology. Okay, system archaeology here is a system documentations, documentations. It's very important when you're dealing with a large system, complex system, or legacy system. System already used for quite a numbers of time. And we have a documentations. You have to refer to documentation in order to know the inside out of the system. Okay, so that's why we call it system archaeology, meaning that you study the legacy system in terms of the formulas, in terms of the complex processes, and so on, from the documentation that given to you. Maybe SRS is a long list of SRS, STD, so you have to study the document. So just like just like you want to actually study the history of the system. Okay, the second document-centric techniques here is a perspective based on reading. You already have your documents, okay, giving to you. However, you have to read it maybe using different perspective as customers, perspective as a tester, perspective as the system engineer, you have to use different perspective of reading. Okay, different perspective of reading in order to understand the document, in order to elicit the requirements from the document. Okay, as a tester, how you are going to use the document in order to come up with the test cases, how you're going to test the system, and so on. So this is actually perspective base of reading. The last one is a requirement reuse, meaning that during the reading of the document centric, okay, especially for the existing system that you want to transform it into different format and so on. So it can use, you can reuse the requirement. For example, my experience of transform standalone Java applications into a web-based application. So actually, all the requirements from the existing system can be used before we add in new elements or new features in the new system. So meaning that some of the requirement can be reused. Some of the requirement can be reused, especially the functionality of the existing Java-based application. So this is how we do it. We study the system, we look at the documentations, we try to understand what is the strength for the standalone system, and what are the needs that they want to transform it into web-based system. What is the idea, what is the concept, and what are the things that needed by the client that urge to transform it into web-based system. So these are the things that you have to actually really pay attention with, during the elicitation. The last one here is the supporting techniques, meaning that during you are conducting using other techniques in order to gather the requirement. These are some supporting techniques that you can use together. Number one is the audio recording or video recording. So for the audio recording and video recording, you have to ask the consent from the user or from your client. Okay, so you have to let them know you are recording something. You have to let them know that you are going to actually keep a record for the audio, keep a record for the video, for the references later on. So notify the stakeholders, notifies the clients about the recording. Okay, have to get the consent. The second one here is using the mind mapping techniques. Mind mapping techniques is very useful when you're dealing with some domain that you have no idea about it. Okay, you have totally no idea about it. Let's say you want to build a hospital management system. So you don't know how many departments that you have in the hospital. How many types of what are the processes that needed in the hospitals and so on, especially the terminology that you want to use, for each department they have sub-department inside it and so on. So maybe the mind mapping is actually very good for you to actually draw a mind map in order to have an overview, the overview concept of what is actually should be contained in the system for the hospital management system and so on. Okay. So the third one here is prototype. So we come across prototypes during last previous session. Okay, prototypes is allowed you to have help you to visualize the requirements and make it clear to your clients what they really want. Okay, so there is a lot of prototype tools, okay, in the market. If you Google prototype tools, you are going to get a numbers of free tools. Some of the tools you can use it for a period of time during the trial, but some of it you can just download it and use it, and some of it allows you to only have create one project and so on. So if you're familiar with the prototype, or you can Google about just in mind Okay, Just in Mind is one of the quite famous prototype tools. Just in Mind, JUSTINMIND, Just in Mind is a prototyping tools. Okay, allows you to have an interface, to have a buttons to click to let the user feel the prototype. Okay, the flow of it help you to identify what are the features, what are the functions, and so on. Another one is InVision. Okay, InVision pun sama satu prototype tools that you can use in order to visualize the features of the system. Okay, and help you to clear out the requirements for your clients. Okay, let them have a look at the features, especially the functionalities of the system beforehand. Another one here is scenario and use case modeling. So we are going to cover it. Okay. So in the scenario, scenario is a real life examples of how a system can be used. Okay. So now basically scenario is going to actually help you to identify the whole process of it. Okay. And what are the things that normally a user uses system and so on. Okay, so in a scenario, you should have descriptions of starting situation. When it's going to start for a situation or for the process, and what will be the normal flow of the events, a description of the what can go wrong during the process, and some informations on the concurrent activities, what are the things can go together with the process, and lastly when it's going to finish. Okay, so this is examples of it. Okay, examples of a scenario for collecting medical history. Okay, again you should write the initial assumption, okay, for the collecting medical history. Okay, so a receptionist at the counters is going to start the process when the patients see the medical receptionist and create a record in the system and collecting the patient's personal information, and the nurse have to log in and collecting the medical history. That is the initial assumptions for the process to start. For a normal flow of it, a nurse is going to search for the patients by family name. If there is more than one patient with the same surname, then the given name, okay, is going to search in order to identify the patients and also date of birth. Okay, then the nurse is going to choose the manual to add to the medical history, follow a list of prompts from the system, enter some informations and about the mental health problem, the existing medical conditions, the medical current medications, and allergic, and also the home life. Okay, this is a normal flow. Okay, after you say the normal flow, what can go wrong? When the patient's record does not exist or cannot be found, then what to do? The nurse is going to create a new account, new record for the personal information and so on. So that is one thing. Another one is patient conditions and medications are not entered in the manual. Okay, so should choose others in order to type in, and can happen also that patients cannot or will not provide information of the medical history because it's the mental health, okay, mental health care. So that means the patient himself or herself have a problems of telling what are the informations or medical history of it. So that is the things that the process, the what can go wrong, okay, during the process. Other activities, the record may be consulted but not edited by other staff when the information is being entered, meaning that at the same time it's created, someone else cannot actually interrupt and edit it. Okay, so at the end of it, what will be the step on the completion? when the user is logged on, and that means they were going to actually create a record in the database. That is the end for the whole process of collecting medical history. So this is actually the things, the major 5 things that needed in a scenario. Okay, in a scenario. Okay, this is supporting. So normally we are going to ask our users to tell the story. Okay, to tell the story, and you are going to record it. Later on, you are going to transcribe it into scenario. Okay, when you transcribe it into scenario, and when you are guiding the users to tell their story, make sure that you ask them to tell what are the process that is actually going to begin. Macam mana nak mula proses tu tanya dia. And then kalau katakan kebiasaan proses tu jalan macam mana Lepas tu dia cerita. Selepas dia cerita, bila customer datang dan sebagainya, ada tak apa-apa masalah? What can go wrong? Okay, what can go wrong? Then after that, masa you masukkan data dan sebagainya, apa yang selalunya, apa yang dia tak boleh, ataupun apa yang concurrent boleh buat, aktiviti yang concurrently yang berlaku, then macam mana you tahu satu proses tu dah habis? Okay, that means you are actually guide your users to tell the story. Okay, to tell the story. Normally, we're going to actually record it, and later on you transcribe it into scenario. Okay, from the scenario, you are going to retrieve it into the user story. From the user story, you try to create task based on the user story. Create some task. Okay. After creating some tasks, you are going into details about the requirements, the system requirements, and so on. Okay, this is how the flow is going on for the scenario. Okay, from the scenario, okay, you can also use the use cases. Okay, use cases are the scenario-based techniques in a UML that you can use to identify how actors can interact with the system. Okay, a set of use cases can describe all possible interactions with the system, meaning that how the users can interact with the system. Okay, how the users can interact with the system. So it can be in the tabular descriptions. Okay, support by the tabular descriptions. You have a diagram, and you can have a tabular descriptions described of the use cases. And normally we are going to use a sequence diagram in order to represent the details of it, the sequence of the event. So this is the example. This is the examples of use case diagram, use cases for the mental health care patient management system. So we have 4 authors here. Authors normally representing by using features. Okay, features, stick features here. So we have medical receptionist, we have nurse, we have manager, we have doctors. We have 4 actors here. So each actors have use case. Okay, you are going to notice that all the use case is represented by using oval. Okay, and you start with a word. Okay, with a word. Register, view, edit, set out, export, generate. Dia mula dengan satu word. Okay, that means the medical receptionist can register the patient, can also view the personal information about the patient. Okay, so for a nurse can view the records, can edit the records. Okay. However, a doctors can view the record, edit the record, at the same time set up for the consultations for the patient. Okay. So these are the things that you have to know how to draw a use case. Okay. So please prepare for the for the final assessment questions. I will only give you a scenario. You are going to actually draw the use case based on the scenario I given. Okay, come up with the use case and come up with the use case tabulate form of it. Okay, like for example here. Okay, this is the use case characters in the middle. So that means you have to create a use case. After the use case, normally we are going to have an activity diagram, and we have a use case description. This is a flow. This is a normal flow of drawing a use case. Okay, so basically we come up with a use case tabulate format. Okay, who are the actors? Okay, what trigger it, preconditions, post conditions. That is the most basic, paling basic lah. Okay, paling basic punya tabulate format of use case. Okay, any questions? I would like to take questions. Any questions so far?
No, Doctor.
No, alright. Okay, pernah buat tak use case ni? Kalau saya bagi senario, suruh buat use case, boleh ke? Kerana benda ni saya beranggapan you dah belajar masa degree. Semua tahu buat use case ke?
Pernah buat dah, Doktor.
Benar eh? Okay, semua pernah buat kan?
Pernah.
Okay, right, good. Okay. So, for the second part of the lectures, that is actually just now punya slide so adalah last week yang kita tak habis tu. So this week actually we are going to cover two parts. That is requirement validations and requirement management. Okay. So in this flow, in this process, this is requirement engineering processes. Okay, requirement engineering is where that you are going to gather the requirements and so on. That's why dalam requirement engineering dia ada proses dia. Satu adalah requirement elicitations. That means you are gather the informations and so on. You are gather the requirement, user requirement, system requirement. Then you do the analysis. Cluster it, okay, into the functions and so on, according to the functions, according to the manual, to the information architectures and so on. Then after that, you are going to validate it. Sama ada betul ke tak you dapat informations requirements ni. Okay, so this is what we call requirement validation. Okay, requirement validation is a process of checking the validity of the requirements so that it's valid. When it's not valid and you proceed with the developments and so on, later on you have to actually fix it. So that's why it's very important for you to validate the requirement with your clients. Validate the requirements with the end users if it's involved the end users and you can reach to the end users. Okay, so during the checking, there are a few things that you have to check. Number one, the most important is the validity. So system provide the functions based on the customer needs. Customer spell out dia nak apa, dia nak function ni, dia nak function ni dan sebagainya. Dia akan spell out, dia perlukan function ni. Okay, ataupun daripada senario dia tak pandai nak cerita, tapi daripada senario dia, you identify what are the function needed for the system and so on. Now, after you gather the requirement, you have to actually ask the client whether whatever you process in the prototype, in the use case, really representing what they want or not. Certain client dia pandai, dia boleh baca use case diagram, dia dah boleh baca, understand it. Because use case diagram is very easy for you to have a communication and react as a interaction tools between you and your clients. But some of the clients would like to see the prototype. That's why you're gonna ambil sedikit masa, build it into prototype using some prototype online free prototype tools in order to come out with a prototype. Let the users feel it. Okay, klik yang ni macam mana, klik yang tu macam mana. So that is how you're going to actually check the validity of the system based on the customer needs. Second here is actually possibility of generating the test cases, verifiability. You have to actually test each of the requirements, whether it can be testable or not. Okay, that is verifiability. Okay, normally kita letak requirement, kita tak ingat pun macam mana dia nak test. So that's why untuk possibility of generate test cases is good. Is a good practice. Needs quite numbers of time and experience of you as a tester. But if you can write a testable requirement, that will be very good for you to ease the process later on. You tahu macam mana you nak test the requirement, okay? And then you have to actually be realistic, okay? Realism within the budget and ability of the technology. Itu paling penting tu, okay? So as I mentioned to you, because most of the things, if you study the existing system, if you study the competitors system and so on, there are the things that should be included. Banyak benda lagi you nak buat dan sebagainya nak include. But be realistic, okay, that you have a limitations of budget. Client hanya bagi berapa budget je, okay, berapa budget dia. So of course you want to, if you, the system is yours, you want to put everything inside. Same go to the client. Kalau boleh dia nak fully utilize the budget yang dia dah bagi tu, dia letak semua function yang dia nak tu dalam tu. But be realistic lah on the durations of the project, the budget of the project, and the most important, the availability of the technology. Okay? Penting tu, kalau you katakan teknologi, you janji dengan users dia akan gunakan AI techniques untuk buatkan proses dan sebagainya, untuk adakan machine learning, menjadikan dia classified dengan laju dan sebagainya. Make sure that you have the techniques or not in your development team. Boleh ke you buat bahagian tu untuk AI especially? Okay, semua orang cakap tentang AI. So customer pun cuba nak cakap tentang AI dan sebagainya. And then you cuba untuk promise untuk AI punya elements and so on. Intelligent lah, menjadikan machine learning, learning by the machine lah, deep learning. Walaupun orang sebut deep learning tak tahu, tapi you nak guna deep learning juga. So do you know exactly the difference between the machine learning and deep learning? Benda-benda macam tu lah. So that's why you have to know in terms of the realism. Okay. Then consistency checking for the conflict. So especially when you deal with numbers of stakeholders. Different stakeholders have different points of view, different stakeholders have different users requirements and so on. So based on requirements, maybe you have some conflict. Make sure that you cross-check on the conflict during the requirement checking. Kalau ada konflik, kerana you akan gather, macam you buat requirement, selepas requirement elicitation, you buat analisis. Masa you buat analisis tu, daripada stakeholders A, stakeholder B, stakeholder C, you dah find out dah requirement ada konflik. Then this is a time for you to voice out, to get the clarifications about the conflict, so that is a firm requirements before you give it to your development team. Okay. The last one is most we call it is ideally to have, but normally is quite difficult to achieve. That is all the required functions are included, the completeness of it. Okay, so normally in the current scenario that most of the software house using Agile. Ada yang gunakan Agile together with the plan driven and so on. So basically, they allow for the change requests, allow for the customer change requests and so on. That's why in terms of completeness, we just can do whatever at that moment. Masa tu kalau you dapat first round dah dapat requirement tersebut, actually make sure that it's complete at that moment. Okay, at that moment. That should be sufficient for the requirement checking. So these are the 5 major checking for the requirements, documentations and so on. So how are you going to validate? Okay, just now is checking. Okay, how you're going to validate it? Validate the document is using the requirement review, prototyping and test case generations. 3 major techniques for you to validate the requirement. Okay, satu validation melalui document, that is requirement review. You set out a team of audits Okay, you set up a team of audits for the requirement. Okay, sama ada audit teams tu adalah kalau tu dalam company, okay, kalau company tu you ada another team kalau you adalah by project based. You adalah ketua projek untuk satu projek A. So dia ada satu projek adalah untuk projek B. Maybe you can ask some of the personnel from the project B to become the auditors for the requirements review. Okay, so basically you can have a formal or informal types of review. So if it is a formal, you have to do some documentations, checking for it, report, and so on. So we have systematic manual analysis. Go through one by one requirement. Go through one by one requirement checking. Okay, that is actually the requirements review. Daripada SRS yang you dah buat, you ask other thing ataupun team of audits in order to audit the requirement, checking one by one manually, systematically. Daripada atas sampai ke bawah, go through one by one. Okay, go through one by one for the SRS documentations and so on. Okay, so in the SRS documentations, in the previous lectures, we have several parts. Kita ada part untuk software, dikira untuk user requirement. Then you can verify dengan user lah. Ada bahagian yang melibatkan system requirements and so on. So you can verify dengan system engineer ataupun client punya engineer dan sebagainya. So and then we have some parts of the software evolution, macam mana nak buat maintenance lepas ni dan sebagainya. Maybe you can ask the maintenance team in order to look at it and so on. So that is actually going to have a systematic manual analysis in order to verify it. So normally after review, then we're going to actually sign off lah. Sign off before we send it to the development team to proceed with the development. Okay, so for the prototyping, we already covered it. Okay, you can have an executable model. Okay, using some tools, prototype tools, in order for you to validate the requirement. Okay, so prototype tools actually is very important for some of the clients, because some of the clients, especially when they no system in place, dia tak ada pengalaman untuk menggunakan sistem lagi kerana company dia tak ada sistem. So that's why you have to come up with a prototyping in order to capture the things or functions that needed by the clients. Okay, and the last one here is a test case generation, meaning that you are going to generate the test case. Okay, generate the test case from the requirement, go through. Cara dia adalah setiap requirement adalah testable. Setiap requirement adalah testable. This is how you're going to validate your requirements is actually boleh terima valid ke tak valid. Okay. So any other things that you want to share? Sesiapa yang pernah buat tak untuk bahagian yang requirement ataupun ada pengalaman? Can you share?
Saya pernah buat development. So masa buat development tu kami akan sediakan, bila dah siap kami akan sediakan unit testing.
Okay.
So dalam unit testing tu kami akan listkan semua testable requirement tu lah.
Okay.
Then kami akan test dan kami akan check dia punya result tu valid ke tak dengan customer requirement.
Okay. So dalam unit testing tu you perlukan tester ke biasa?
Selalunya yang test tu yang buat. Tapi ada lagi satu tester yang dia akan validate apa yang kami test.
Okay. So itu adalah at the end kan, tester adalah at the end. Ya, unit testing tu bermaksud selepas dah buat, so bermaksud you punya the development team itself is going to test it. Sama ada valid ke tak valid. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, right. So very good practice lah you punya company. So it's going to do you see that that will be a process that is going to actually lowers the risk of the system failure? Do you see it?
Yes. When we actually practice the unit testing and so on, so we know part mana yang sistem tu betul-betul ikut apa yang customer nak.
Okay, so very good practice, very good practice. Selama ni saya kebanyakan buat unit testing, jarang katakan betul-betul follow tu. Okay,
Sebab
yang unit
company saya ni dia CMMI 5.
oh, that's 5.
The highest one.
Oh, dia memang follow lah CMM kau.
Yes. Yes. Kami memang ada documentation from the requirement up to release document.
Okay, for the system lah.
Yes.
Very good lah you punya company. Tapi boleh dapat CMM5 tu memang very structure punya
Yes.
Okay. Cuma workers dia akan tension lah disebabkan recorded. Okay, but easy.
Yang buat record tu, yang buat documentation semua orang yang sama yang buat sistem juga. So ada double work.
But it's good lah. Is a point of reference lah. Kalau ada apa-apa went wrong, that means you directly check on the document and you can find kat mana dia. Okay, right. So thank you for the sharing. So meaning that if you want to have a testable requirement and so on, it needs more effort. Okay, it needs more effort from the team. So we have pro and cons lah. Apabila you nak sesuatu project ataupun sesuatu sistem siap dengan cepat, at the same time you have to take care of the documentation and so on. Sometimes it's quite tired because bagi you penting adalah functionality, dapat deliver the functions and so on. So basically we still have the mindset after finish it, then we're going to document it. So based on whatever dah share tadi tu adalah CMM5 that is actually really concerns about the reporting and documentations. So it's a pro and cons. So for those who really follow the company that really follow CMM and so on standards, so we're going to actually is a good reputation. Saya dengar pun rasa macam confident. Okay, kalau nak bagi project kepada company itu, maksud it's actually is a confident, it's a standard that the company follow. So it's a good practice actually. Okay. So the requirements review here should be held when the requirement definition is being formulated. Both you have to involve the client and contractors. Okay, for the review can be formal, can be informal. However, you have to conduct a meeting that between the developers and customers and the users, resolved the problems as early as possible during the requirement review. Kalau ada masalah apa-apa, contohlah customer perlukan benda yang melibatkan teknologi dan sebagainya. Kalau developers ataupun you punya contractor saying that the one that want to develop the development team kata memang tak possible untuk buat, then have to clear out. Okay, have to clear out. Jangan kata you say yes to the user, okay, you push your development team to do it. Your development team dah cakap dengan you tak boleh buat, tapi you janjikan apa-apa yang bintang dengan bulan dengan customers, that will be going to actually have a dissatisfactions at the end of the system. Okay, that is a reality that you have to face it. During the review, checking for the availability, comprehensive or not, is that traceable for the requirement? Kita ada traceability, requirement traceability matrix. So tengok requirement mana sambung dengan requirement apa dan sebagainya. So adaptability, whether the requirement can be changed without a large impact or not. So that is actually the review check for the 4 things that they have checked. check for the comprehensiveness, boleh verify ke tak, and traceable, bermaksud requirement ni akan kait dengan requirement mana, requirement ni akan kait dengan use case mana dan sebagainya. So and then it's traceable lah. Okay, so the last process is actually the requirement management. Okay, is a requirement management. So requirement management is focused on the process of managing the changing of the requirement. That's why selain daripada prototype ataupun sistem, kita ada version 1, version 1.1, version 1.2 dan sebagainya. Requirement document pun ada version dia. Okay, daripada awal punya version, kita ada version 1, lepas tu ada perubahan sikit, kita 1.1 dan sebagainya. SRS pun ada documentation management tu. Okay, ada document management. Okay, just now Maisara ke yang cakap tu tadi? Share tu?
Ya saya.
Okay, you ada buat tak requirement management dalam company tu? Suppose to be ada kot.
Requirement management.
Maksud you keep document tak? Keep document kan? By version. Macam mana you manage you punya requirement document? Document dah ada. So setelah you kena test dan sebagainya, how you document it in your company?
Kami letak dalam satu folder.
Okay.
Supaya sesiapa yang lepas ni kena touch on that requirement, so dia orang boleh refer dekat folder yang sama.
Okay. So that means you didn't use any of the software tools in order to track the requirement management, tak ada lah. You hanya share folder. How you number it? How you name the requirement?
Dia ada nama dia. Nama. Memang kami ikut dia punya apa kita panggil? Contohnya dokumen 1 macam mana saya nak cerita?
Dia ada dokumen nama dia. Nama dia ikut proses ke atau macam mana?
Apa dia?
Dia punya documentation management tu, naming tu.
Naming tu memang company dah setkan, so kami akan ikut. Lepas tu setiap projek tu dia ada naming dia sendiri. Daripada situ kita boleh tahulah, okay, dokumen ni untuk projek yang ni. Macam tu.
Okay, so that means you have certain, we call it meta model lah. Meta model. Maksud kita ada naming, ada certain naming untuk files and so on, right? So you kena follow the naming convention. Okay, naming convention dah ada. Right.
Convention,
okay,
yes.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so sometimes when we yes.
Nak tanya, tool apa yang kita boleh guna kalau betul-betul dalam documentation ni?
Documentations ni biasa kita kalau untuk yang ni boleh gunakan untuk Microsoft punya project, kebiasaan kita guna. Satu lagi tools yang kita guna last time, saya pun tak ingat lah tools nama apa. Dia more kepada project management tool. Dia more kepada project management. Tools yang melibatkan project management.
Yang open source tak ada kata?
Open source setakat ni ada satu tu kita guna, saya dah lupa dah, pernah kita guna dalam team untuk kita sharekan apa-apa requirement supaya kita take out daripada members tu, kita tahu kita assign kepada members mana. Tapi saya tak ingat dah tools tu. Saya pernah guna untuk satu project. Saya tak ingat dah. Ada free tools juga, tapi dia more kepada dikira requirement lah, requirement management tool tu. Kalau biasa kita keep dalam, asalkan ada satu naming convention. So contoh macam yang Maisara tadi company dia ada satu naming convention tu, bermaksud janji you adalah how you going to manage the requirement and you know the traceability of the requirement. Maksud requirement tu dia akan link dengan requirement mana, dia akan link dengan test cases mana dan sebagainya. Janji dia adalah ada untuk traceability. Traceability is very important. Ya, kalau tak, you tak tahu adalah lepas ni kalau you ada change request untuk requirement tersebut, you tak tahu dia akan impact kepada requirement mana. So tu yang ada masalah nanti kalau you tak ada traceability of the requirement.
Yang manual tu problem dia kita nak maintain dia punya versioning tu.
Version tu untuk manual. You ada masalah, you cerita sikit.
Tak, maksudnya nak apa? Nak maintain dia punya versioning tu, nak follow mana yang apa previous, mana yang latest, yang tu yang problem tu. Bila kita tak ada pakai tool, kita just share dalam cloud je. Bila kita nak rujuk balik tu, sometimes kita akan rujuk dokumen yang salah lah.
Dokumen yang salah lah. So that's why dia kena ada version dia lah. Kalau keep kepada satu version, you dah company client dah sign off, version tersebut akan diguna pakai untuk development. Lepas tu kalau katakan ada review lagi dan sebagainya, you kena create ada major changes in the requirement, you kena create adalah another version of it. So this is how you going to actually manage the requirement version. So maksud kita, the team member should know, kalau katakan naming conversion, dah keluar version, contoh you adalah keluar version 1, lepas tu you ada minor changes in the certain functionality, certain requirement dan sebagainya, you akan jadikan dia 1.1 dan sebagainya. So apabila terlampau banyak changes yang ada, bermaksud perlu untuk satu version yang baru, you akan baru keluar satu version dia version 2.0. Bermaksud akan tahu adalah majority benda dah ubah dalam requirement tersebut. So dia kena ada juga someone who look into the requirements punya documents, so and then it have to made known to the team members. Macam you kata lah, kalau team members refer kepada requirement yang salah, nanti buat semua yang salah. Okay. So basically you sekarang buat macam mana dalam company?
Sekarang kita just buat manual je, then kita share dekat dalam cloud.
Whole document ke?
Ya, doktor.
Okay. So ada tak version, naming version dan sebagainya?
Naming version yang apa, yang betul-betul standard kita praktikkan tu tak adalah, just by file tu je lah.
Okay, by file lah, itu yang masalah challenge yang ada lah, challenge yang ada untuk apa yang requirements ni. Okay, requirement. Okay, thank you for the sharing. So why you change the requirement? Okay, the slides here, why you change the requirement? Kenapa kena perlu untuk senario yang perlukan you tukar requirement? So some of the reasons are listed here. Number one is because of the business environment change. Okay, business environment change after the installations or before the installation pun. After verifications with your client dan sebagainya, dia berubah. Why is environment change, instead of using some things and so on, ataupun gunakan certain browser di mana tak support certain components and so on, ataupun ada some browser coming out and actually the company using different browser in order for the companies and so on. So if you install it of the current needs and so on, there are some changes. That's why you have to change the requirement. The second here is actually the system, customers and user are really different. Contohnya Maybank, dia payah you untuk buat sistem dan sebagainya. Maybank sebenarnya berhad tu akan jadi you punya client. Okay, you punya client. So client yang akan bayar, dia akan beritahu dia perlukan ni dan sebagainya. You dah ikut dah client tersebut, keluarkan function yang dia nak dan sebagainya. Bermaksud in terms of client dah verify, client dah kata okay dan sebagainya. But when you push to the usage and so on kepada operation, so user lain, Maybank user lain. Bermaksud dia ada a lot of different types of user dan sebagainya. When it use it, Allah rasa tak friendly lah, kena klik macam ni, kena klik macam tu. So that is how actually make the requirement change. Apabila user ada problems, dia akan complain dengan Maybank. Maybank pun kata, alamak, kena tukar ni. That's why the requirement change. So the customers and the end users actually sometimes is not the same persons. So that's why we have a changing requirement, the basic changing requirement. The last reasons here actually is a diverse user community and needs. So especially kepada mobile lah, like say mobile application, mobile game dan sebagainya. You nak push out satu mobile game, okay? And then you hanya survey untuk sekelintir orang je untuk nak kepada mobile game tersebut. So apabila macam tu, requirements dia adalah is a diverse user community. So bermaksud you hanya cater untuk certain things je. Contoh develop satu mobile apps, you collect users, bunch of users nak guna mobile apps tersebut dan sebagainya. You dah fulfill dah bahagian tu, fulfill the needs of the focus group, then you focus untuk gather the requirement. But when you push it to the Google Play Store ataupun dalam Apple dan sebagainya, iOS Store lah. So apabila macam tu, orang download guna dan sebagainya, dia kata tak fulfill lah needs dan sebagainya. Because of what? Because of diverse user community. So that is a challenge for the mobile application development during the requirement elicitations. So this is the normal flow for the evolutions. You have initial understanding of the problem. After you understand it, you come up with the initial requirement. So however, from time to time, it's going to change. When you have a change of the understanding of problem, you are going to actually change requirement. So that is actually requirement evolution. So that's why ada dua contoh tadi tu cerita, memang requirement akan tukar. Okay, requirement akan bertukar in terms of times and so on. So when we want to management of the requirement, there are a few things that you have to identify. Number one is each requirement must be uniquely identified so that it can be cross-referenced with other requirements. Contoh requirement, biasalah kita orang buat adalah requirement ada labeling dia. Requirement 1, REQ 1, requirement 2, REQ 2, requirement 3, REQ 3 dan sebagainya. So daripada requirement tersebut, dia akan linkkan kepada kita ada traceability table. Traceability table maksud requirement ni akan ke mana? Requirement ni akan link kepada requirement mana dan sebagainya. So when you have a traceability tables and so on, any change requirement, contoh requirement akan change requirement number 10. Requirement number 10 dia akan nampak dia adalah link dengan requirement number 1 and requirement number 2. That's why you baru boleh tahu adalah kalau saya change requirement ni akan effect kepada requirement mana dan sebagainya. Okay, so you have to know also the change management process. You have to know what are the activities that is going to actually assess the impact and the cost of changes. Kalau tukar requirement, apa proses dia? Change management process. Then traceability policy, as I mentioned to you, what will be the relationship between the requirement with others requirement inside the system, traceability, how you're going to trace it. And for the tool support, you have the tool support from paling biasa adalah guna spreadsheet lah saya kata. Ada yang gunakan some database system untuk untuk traceability dan sebagainya. Okay, so this is actually tool support lah in order to know what will be the management. So when we have change management for the requirement change management, the first one is the process problem analysis and change specification. Okay. The change proposal is send it to you. Kata saya perlukan tukar satu requirement dan sebagainya. You have to check for the validity. Okay, validate. So after you analyze it, you get back to your requester to a more specific requirement, change a proposal, or you decide to withdraw the request. Okay, check sama ada boleh ubah ke tak boleh ubah dan sebagainya. Okay, that is actually the process of it. Okay, kalau boleh ubah, okay, the effect of the change is assessed. Okay, kalau boleh ubah, you kena tengok using the traceability informations, what will be the requirements that correlated will be impact for the requirements and so on. And once analysis is done, because of the costing, kalau you nak ubah ni, kena ubah requirement apa dan sebagainya. And then is that going to cost the money? Kalau perlu, then perlu tak tambah duit dan sebagainya. So that's why bila ada change requirements, request dan sebagainya, you have to verify it with the client. Yang mana yang you dah calculate. That's why masa nak buat tender, okay, biasa kita akan letakkan dalam 20% higher. 20% higher from the estimated cost untuk cater the change request. Otherwise, when we have a change request and you cannot entertain, so that will be bad reputation for your company. Orang akan buat sekali dia dengan company you and dia rasa macam rigid lah company tu. Dah buat nanti ini tak boleh, itu tak boleh, tambah sikit kena duit dan sebagainya. So that's why most of the project manager, experienced project manager, they are going to actually add in extra 20% in margin in order to cater the change request punya cost, change request punya cost. So menjadikan ada sedikit lah flexibility untuk ambilkan change request tersebut. Kalau tak, contohlah klien kita pun human juga. Kalau you dah bayar, contoh you dah bayar 50,000, okay, ataupun 100,000 untuk satu sistem. Lepas tu you nak ubah, suruh sikit, ubah sikit ni, ubah sikit tu. Orang tu kata tak boleh. Kalau nak ubah ni, tambah duit. Kan 100,000
Doktor tak dengar.
tersebut. Kos nak buat sistem tak dengar. Boleh ke? Tak dengar?
Boleh.
Sorry. Oh, kat mana tak dengar tu? Daripada tadi lah.
Tak baru je.
Baru je? Okay, right. So, macam saya kata lah, kalau katakan cost betul-betul cost untuk build out the system, nak bayar kepada team members, campur untung dan sebagainya, adalah dalam 60,000. So you dah charge client tu 100,000. Maksud you ada 40,000 lagi untuk flexibility for the change request dan sebagainya. So bila macam tu, bila client beritahu adalah dia perlu ubah apa-apa, then you buat analisis. Ada tak masih boleh cover dalam cost lagi dan sebagainya. If it's still in your margin of the cost and so on, then most of the company will going to absorb it. Okay, without saying to the client tambah duit dan sebagainya. Then we're going to actually for kita pun human Kalau you katakan saya dah bayar 100,000, benda sikit tukar pun nak charge saya duit, kan dia rasa macam tak berapa puas hati lah. So same things happens here. Okay, same things happens here. Normally experienced project manager will going to add in another portions for the change request, and try to entertain the client because they already charge it. Okay, so once you agree for the document changing and so on, make sure that you change you have a change requirement. Make sure that you document it properly. Document it properly. The document should be organized so that the changes can be easily implemented. Okay, implemented before you have a revised requirements stated in the document. So that's why setiap company dia ada cara sendiri untuk keep track on the requirement. Paling penting semua team member tahu adalah naming conversion dia. Okay, selepas ada ubah dan sebagainya, what are the way that you have to notify to the team member? Requirement document dah ubah ni. Ini adalah version yang terbaru dan sebagainya. That's why project managers play a very important role. Okay, salah satu tugas dia adalah untuk keep track on the change request. Okay, change request and the change requirement change document. Okay, kalau dah ubah dan sebagainya, make sure there is a channel for you to share with the team members. So that team member tahu nak refer kepada the latest document kat mana dan sebagainya. Right? So let us very quickly go through the system modeling. So now it's already 9:30. So take 5 dulu. So what is the time now? Wait. Time is 9:34. External will be on the context of your system with the environment. Maksud macam mana sistem you boleh dengan komponen ataupun sistem lain, keadaan dia. Okay, so interaction perspective will model the interactions between the system and its environment. Normally is a user. Dalam use case diagram lah, bermaksud dia ada actors and you have the system. So how the actors can use the system for doing something and so on. So we are going to model the interactions perspective, okay, between the actors and the system. So the third one here is a structural perspective. When we talk about structural, kita letak dalam lah, lagi dalam daripada sistem tu. That means the data strategy, how you're organizing the system and so on. So that will be the integral part of the system. Dalaman tu sistem tersebut kita gunakan structural perspective. The last one here is the behavioral perspective. If you want to actually to represent how your system is going to react based on the event, based on the data and so on. We have data driven and we have event driven. So behavior perspective of the system. So normally we are going to actually have a step diagram, okay, or you can actually representing some event processing, how you're going to actually stimulate the system based on the event. Is actually starting from the event. So for the UML diagram types, we have few types here. We have whoever involved in the system development, you are going to very familiar with these kinds of diagram. Kita ada activity diagrams, use case diagram, tadi dah tunjuk use case diagram, sequence diagram, class diagram and state diagram. These are the formal normal 5 diagrams. Okay, when we talk about activity diagram, seperti nama dia lah, show the activity involved in the process. So basically you have to know we call it the standard of activity diagrams. Maksud activity diagram dia kena lukis dalam swing line. Maksud dia ada swing line dia. Swing line in terms of the actors, in terms of the system. So dia akan ada swing line dia sendiri. Swing line untuk actors, swing line untuk sistem dan sebagainya. So bila macam tu dia ada activity diagrams, okay? Jadi basically kena tahu apa structure dia. When you talk about use case diagram, is representing the system and its environments here, can be the actors, can be the external system and so on. So what can actors do to the system? How they're going to interact with the current system and so on. Or how other system can make use of the system and what the system can provide to other system. So that will be the interaction between a system and its environment. Gunakan use case diagram tu yang tadi kata ada yang gunakan stick features tu. Ada actors dan kita ada oval shape, di mana oval shape tu ada mula dengan verts dan sebagainya. So itu adalah bentuk dia. You basically kena tahulah dengan betul. Sequence diagram show the interaction between the actors and the system. Okay, system components. So bermaksud dalam sequence diagram, okay, bila sebut je sequence diagram, you kena ada bayangan di mana macam mana bentuk dia. Bermaksud semua actors, semua components adalah kat bahagian atas. Lepas tu you ada dotted line from the top until the end, the bottoms of the diagram. So you ada lifespan dan sebagainya. So that will be the sequence. So sequence diagram punya outlook tu, dia punya bentuk dia. Then go to the class diagram, that object kita bila you belajar dalam object oriented dan sebagainya. So you gunakan class diagram in order to represent the object inside the system, and between object and object you have association, you ada aggregation, ada generalization dan sebagainya. So relationship between object and object. Okay, so benda tu penting penting untuk sesiapa yang adalah dia design untuk diagram ni dia kena tahu in details. Okay, and lastly adalah step diagram, shows how the system is going to react internal and external events for the step diagram, whether it is actually invoked by the data driven or the event driven. Okay, siapa kat sini biasa lukis diagram ni? Biasa involve dan lukis diagram? Tak ada Tak ada orang ke untuk aktiviti untuk diagram ni? Tak biasa Can you hear me?
Yes,
Boleh.
Tak ada orang involve untuk diagram ni? Tak ada. Okay.
Tak ada doktor. Dia orang provide je, kita orang.
Kalau macam tu exam keluar dengan diagram tu hancur lah semua.
Alah, janganlah doktor.
Okay. Kalau suruh you lukis boleh ke? Kerana benda ni paling basic lah you. Bagi senario, soalan satu je cukup.
Tak terlibat secara langsung doktor. Tak terlibat secara langsung.
Yeah. Okay. So kalau keluar soalan untuk melibatkan diagram ni memang hancur lah semua. Soalan master senang je. Soalan master bagi satu senario, suruh identify and come up with a use case. Daripada use case, come up with a sequence. Cukup lah soalan.
So only the sequence
In
diagram
practice.
doktor.
Ha?
Saya rasa masa
diagram
degree
lah.
dah buat dah.
Oh, kan? Degree dah buat kan?
Degree pernah buat lah.
So master tu memang kacang je lah ya. Dah ada orang bagi feedback dah. Degree dah buat dah. Ini kacang je. Saya suruh keluar soalan dapat 100 lah. Okay.
Saya tak
So
janji
these are some
100.
tak janji 190 boleh lah ya. Okay, so this is a relationship between the perspective. Kalau kita nak kata external perspective, dia more kepada context diagram lah. Kalau interactive perspective, kita boleh represent dengan, kalau UML adalah represent dengan use case diagram ataupun sequence diagram. Kalau structural perspective, kita boleh kepada class diagram ataupun entity relationship diagram, ERD. ERD kalau biasa adalah melibatkan database lah. Okay, database kita ada primary key dan sebagainya, kita set attributes dan sebagainya. So supaya kita boleh representing the ERD. And lastly kita ada step diagram, adalah jenis yang behavioral. Okay, contoh behavioral. So ini adalah matching dia between the perspective and matching between the UML diagram. Okay. So the usage of the graphical model ni, graphical model actually react as a facilitate the discussions between us and also the client. Okay, so dia akan jadikan satu means of facilitating the discussions. Okay, so visualize it to capture the requirements, to capture the functionality of the systems and so on. And it's a way for documenting for the system. And lastly, you can provide a detailed system descriptions. So basically, any use case diagram is going to actually have a use case descriptions in a tabulate form. So from each use case, it will going to actually have we call it activity diagrams, or have a sequence diagram in order to represent the process. Okay, so basically based on these diagrams, okay, you are going to have a very detailed system descriptions. Kalau baca je diagram, kita dah tahu dah sistem ni akan buat apa. So supposed to be deliver some things, what will be the expected expected input and output, and so on. Okay, so this is actually the use for the graphical diagram. The first one, context diagram. When we talk about context diagram, actually is we call it to give an overview what will be the system boundary, what it should be content inside the system, and what should be actually the limitations outside the system that we didn't cover. So like for example, this one is a context diagram for mental health care patient management system. Tengah-tengah tu mental health care patient management system. So this context diagram shows the environment, what are the other system inside, what will be the other system that supposed to be communicate with the system that you want to build. Let's say management healthcare system here is going to communicate with the admission system. Maksud kalau ada admission system, dia akan another module, another subsystem. So dia akan buat admissions process. After the admission process is going to actually send a copy in the management healthcare patient management system. So if you need some prescription for the pharmacies and so on, it is going to actually activate the module that we call prescription system. So if you want to set an appointment with the doctors and so on, they will have an appointment system. Then if you want to have a healthcare statistic, what will be the healthcare, the patient statistic, the drugs, prescriptions and so on, we have a statistic system. Then we have another one that is for the reporting purposes, untuk generating, untuk top management ataupun middle range of manager, in order to come out with a monthly report, weekly reports, and to the top management and so on. So we have a reporting system. Contohnya apa ubat yang tak jual, siapa doktor yang paling tak laku, siapa adalah department mana yang paling banyak dapat komplain dan sebagainya. That is reporting. Very important for the management to know and do some decision making. Okay, so contoh ada certain bulan tu patients terlampau ramai di mana katil tak cukup dan sebagainya. Atau certain season di mana memang very low season and tak ada income, tak cukup nak tambung untuk whole management untuk hospital dan sebagainya. So that kinds of report is actually very important for the top management to make a decision. Okay. And the last one actually is a patient record system. Okay, patient record system. So meaning that the middle part, let's say the middle part is your concern. Management healthcare patient, mental healthcare patient management system. When you want to create a management system, that means we have to communicate with other subsystem. Okay, with other subsystem. And then ini adalah context diagram yang show the boundary. Perlu tak sistem ni cover untuk admission? Tak perlu, disebabkan dia dah cover orang lain. Okay, dia cover oleh subsystem. Perlu tak dia cover untuk appointment? Tak perlu, kerana appointment dia ada panggil subsystem lain dan sebagainya. So this context diagram actually show the boundary of the system. What should be included and what should be outside the system. It's not included in the system. Okay, so the second ones here is the process. Process. So process models basically is a UML activity diagram. Okay, UML activity diagram used to define the business process. Paling senang lah untuk pada proses. So as I mentioned to you, we have a few, we call it a swing line of it. So ini adalah dia tak berapa clear dia punya swing line. Sepatutnya swing line dia ada clear untuk siapa. Okay, akan kepada siapa. So we have to confirm this one is a process model for the involuntary detection. Bermaksud sesuatu patient, so mental health care patient datang, kita tahu dah dia perlu untuk kita simpan dia detection detention, bermaksud kita kena simpankan patient tersebut. Okay, once confirm you kena simpan, doktor kata ini mental health care patients kena simpan ni. So there are two decisions here. Okay, so inform the patients of right and record the detentions decision. Okay, once you record and inform about the patient, so we have to make a decision. Kalau mental health care patients ni adalah jenis yang not dangerous, tak bahaya. Apabila tak bahaya, dia pergi directly ke hospital admitted. Apabila admitted, dia perlu activate untuk admission system. Maksudnya kita kena proseskan cara dia untuk admission dan sebagainya. But if the patient is type of dangerous mental health care, so datang orang gila, memang bahaya dan sebagainya, you have to find a secure place. If you can find a secure place in the hospital, you're going to actually transfer it. But if the place is not available, then you have to transfer it to the police. Okay, kena hantar ke Nazim lah. Okay, hantar ke Nazim untuk take care lah, police station. Okay, so after that you have to actually inform the series of the activities. So these are the process model. These are the process model to show the process of the activities. So ini hanya satu case saja. Kalau involuntary detention, okay? So what will be the things that you have to process? In terms of interaction model, we have use case diagram and sequence diagram that show the system-to-system interaction to highlight the communication between the system. So for the use case modeling, then you have to actually, every use case represent a discrete task. Maksud satu task yang melibatkan interactions actors with the system. Okay, the actors can be person, can be user, can be another system also. So the actors actually provide an overview of how you are going to use the system. Okay, so let's say this is a use case. Actors dia siapa? Actors dia ada dua orang. Dua benda. Satu adalah person, that is medical receptionist. Satu adalah system, patient record system. Meaning that the medical receptions is going to transfer the data to the patient record system. Okay, so that is a transfer data use case. This is one example. From that example, you come up with tabulate description. So this is a basic tabulate description. Okay. Contohlah kalau dalam assessment nanti suruh you buat senario adalah untuk katakan adalah e-learning system. Okay, how you going to actually use the e-learning U-Future lah, U-Future. Okay, list out cases dalam U-Future. Okay, use case in U-Future. Okay, suppose you kena list out lah. Kerana you adalah student, you yang gunakan U-Future. Macam mana penggunaan untuk U-Future? List out 5. Boleh tak? Rasanya boleh kot. U-Future. Macam mana you guna U-Future tu? 5 things 5 use case.
I learn lah doktor. I learn dah lama pakai. U-Future baru lagi.
Oh, Island lah. Okay, Island. Ataupun ATM machine lah. ATM machine semua pakai kan. Ada yang kata Island, saya baru nak belajar Island dah tutup jadi U-Future. You dah lama gunakan Island. Ada yang tak lama lagi, baru first time First semester punya student, dia kata Island pun tak kenal, U-Future baru nak mula. So kemungkinan let's say ATM lah, ATM semua orang guna, ambil duit kot. Semua orang guna ambil duit. Can you list out 5 use case for ATM? Kalau katakan 5 use case for ATM. Apa yang you guna untuk ATM machine tu?
Keluar duit.
Keluar duit, withdraw money, lagi?
Deposit.
Transfer money, okay, lagi?
Deposit duit juga.
Deposit duit lagi? Check balance.
Check duit.
Okay, check balance. Set password.
Pay bills.
Pay bills.
Pay bills.
Okay. These are the cases, okay? These are the use case that you can actually interact with ATM, okay? Is a auto teller machine. Okay, from the auto teller machine, you ada use case lah. Daripada use case, you buat satu tabulate tu, tabulate description. Like say just now adalah untuk transfer data just now. Once transfer data, data dia, machine dia, dia punya sistem dia, nama dia mental health care patient management system, and then dia punya adalah transfer data. Kalau biasa, kalau kita buat dalam requirement, biasa kita ada gunakan US lah, kita ada nombor use case use case, so UC 001 benda, UC 002 benda apa. So biasa kita ada numbering lah, it's based on the company lah, based on the company. So this one is a transfer data. Kita ada case tu. Use case punya nama ke atas adalah transfer data. List out actors. Again, list out actors. This is a tabular description. List out actors. Then description tu bermaksud transfer data tu case apa? Description dia, when receptions may transfer the data from the system to a general patient record database maintained by the health authority. The information transfer might consist of personal information as listed and a summary of the patient's diagnosis and treatment. Data yang untuk masuk adalah patient's personal information and treatment summary. Data yang akan masuk. Stimulate akan bermula dengan apa? Bermula dengan command from the medical receptionist. Bermula dengan ada user command. Dia klik proses ke apa. Respond, apa yang respond, dia akan confirmation sama ada updated ke tak data tu. So what will be the command? The receptionist must have appropriate security permission. Maksud bila nak update, dia kena check dia punya user ID. Okay, user ID in order to access the patient. Kalau dia bukan seorang medical receptionist yang ada ID, maka dia tak boleh transfer data. Okay, that is the command yang ada. Okay, that is the command. This is the basic tabular description. Ada yang buat sampai detail juga. Macam normal flow, exception flow, boleh tak ada masalah. So as long as your company actually have a standard punya. Standard basically yang standard punya akan ada process flow lah. Normal process flow, exception flow. Exception flow tu maksud dia sekiranya apa yang berlaku apa-apalah exception. So what will be display, message apa yang display dan sebagainya. So that is a use case. So this is examples for the role for a medical receptionist. Okay. Kebiasaan kita ada satu stick features dengan nama tu actors tu. Then dia kata line, ada line and then ada oval. Okay, oval. Itu adalah standard yang biasa Standard yang luar biasa pun ada, tapi ini adalah standard yang biasa. So ada word in front of it with a word, and your system should be in the square brackets yang ada untuk representing the system boundary. Okay, that is a normal look for the use case diagram. Okay, from the use case diagram, biasa kita akan buat sequence diagram. Sequence diagram to model the interaction between the actors and the object. Maksud apabila actors ada, dia akan communicate dengan object dalam sistem. Basically, all the actors and object will be listed on top of the diagram. On top of the diagram, and we are going to draw a dotted line vertically from the top to the bottom. Okay, so this is how the sequence diagram look like. Okay, sequence diagram. Sequence diagram kita mula dengan medical receptionist. Okay, tadi case tadi ya untuk nak transfer data tu. Okay, daripada seorang dia akan call medical receptionist, dia akan corresponding dengan 3 objek. Satu adalah objek untuk patient info, satu objek adalah tentang database, satu objek untuk authorization. Okay, dia akan communicate dengan 3 objek ataupun 3 komponen dalam sistem. So you gonna draw the dotted line from the top to the bottom, and you akan tahu adalah satu square yang ada lifespan. Lifespan representing what will be the life at the time span for the system. So the time span paling panjang adalah medical receptionist because it's actually deal with the system, deal with the object. Okay. So firstly, we're going to actually view the info by enter the patient ID. Patient ID dapat je info tersebut, dia akan hantar untuk request for the report. Whatever information is needed and together with the user ID. When the user ID reach the database component will going to check whether the user ID is valid or not. When it is valid, it's going to actually give the authorization. When the authorization, ada alternate kat bawah tu. Alternate tu bermaksud kalau kita translate kepada program biasa adalah if-else statement. If the authorization is okay, that means UID, user ID is valid in the database, that he or she, the medical receptionist, can view the patient info. But when the authorization is fail, meaning that it is not authorized receptionist, okay? Maksud receptionist yang user ID dia dah expired dan sebagainya, they will go to no access to the data, the patient data dan sebagainya. Okay, so this is a sequence diagram. Okay, normally the business analyst is going to give us this. Okay, that's why business analyst gaji dia tinggi. Dia dapat je information, requirements tu pass kat dia. Business analyst akan mula draw diagram. Mula draw diagram tu bermaksud every diagram yang dia lukis tu kena representing requirements. And then dia kena represent dengan betul. Bila betul, baru diagram ni adalah pass kepada development team untuk untuk buat. Okay, that is a flow of it. That is a flow of it, and it's very important in a big or large system, complex system. Okay, yeah, use it for 10 years, 20 years, and so on. So the documentations, the flow is very important. The diagram is very important as a point of reference, especially for later on the maintenance or evolutions of the software. Okay, so this is another sequence diagram. Okay, another sequence diagram for the transfer data. So beside from the use case, beside from the sequence diagram, we have a diagram, we call it structural model. Structural model, basically you are creating something in order to represent the organizations of a system. What are the components that make out the whole system? Okay, we are using the UML diagram called class diagram in order to represent each object class. And from the object, with the object, you have to list the association. That is a relationship between the classes. Okay, here we have two objects. Sorry, we have patient record. So we have association saying that one patient should only have one patient record, one-to-one, okay, one-to-one relationship. So in this association, we can actually tell out we have one-to-many, many-to-one, many-to-many association. Okay, yang ni semua boleh baca ke? Pandai baca kot? Interpret?
Ya, doktor, boleh doktor.
Boleh, very simple one, right? So actually, just a very quick example. Let's say, many patients can referred by a general practitioner. Okay, so ataupun one practitioner can be referred by many patients. Okay, asalkan you pandai untuk baca lah. Pandai untuk baca. So one patient can be diagnosed by many conditions, okay? Or many patients can be diagnosed with same conditions, penyakit yang sama. Boleh, tak ada masalah. That's why dia ada many to many, okay? Many to many. So bermaksud dia boleh kata seorang patient diagnosed dengan banyak conditions, banyak penyakit lah. Dia ada tekanan darah tinggi, dia ada kencing manis dan sebagainya. But boleh ada many patients diagnosed with the same conditions. Ada sekumpulan patients ni diagnosed dengan diabetic saja. So with one condition. So this is how we are going to read the association. So hopefully you can actually understand it. So because when we come to the development team development team should able to understand and to able to transform it into the control of the entity ataupun kelas yang ada lah. Okay, supaya kita tak salah. Yes.
Doktor, tanya sikit doktor.
Ya.
Yang bawah sekali tu,
Mhm.
many consultation tu pergi 1 ke 4 tu, 1/4 tu apa maksud dia doktor?
So bermaksud seorang doktor paling banyak tu bermaksud dia hospital doctor tu. Hospital doctor tu dia boleh running banyak consultation. Okay, banyak consultation lah. Bermaksud seorang doktor dia boleh running banyak consultations. Tapi satu consultations tu paling banyak boleh refer ke dengan 4. Paling banyak boleh refer kepada 4 je doctors, hospital doctors kat situ. Consultations tu. Boleh ke?
Boleh, cuma kalau nak jadikan ERD tu saya agak confused lah.
Agak confused Confused kat mana? ERD.
Sebab consultation tu many lah, tapi 1 dengan 4 tu
Macam tak logik kan? Dah kena verify balik lah. This is how they capture. Maybe this is actually a request by that hospital. Okay, request by that hospital. So that's why kena verify balik lah. Kerana ini adalah mental health care. Mental health care, dia ada cases dia. Kita tak tahu. So ini adalah representing. This is only one example. Okay, this is only one example lah. So benda ni penting untuk kita translate di kemudian lah kepada entity, relationship diagram dan sebagainya. Okay. But during the classes ni kita paling penting nak emphasize kat sini, you kena letak association. Okay, kena letak association. That is actually the format of it. Maksud kalau kita nak lukis class diagram, ini adalah format dia. Okay, format dia. And then ini more kepada detail parts of it lah. Detail parts of it we have actually attributes, we have methods. Okay, atas tu adalah attributes, bawah tu methods. So dalam object oriented concept, we actually have a generalizations in order to manage the complexity. So we have a general characteristic of some classes. Like for example, give example adalah animals, car, houses, patients and students, employee and so on. Ini adalah boleh kepada generalizations. However, we can actually have a different attribute jugalah. That's why kita ada inheritance mechanism in order to keep track of it. Like for example here, generalizations, kita katakan seorang doctors, okay, dia adalah super class dia doctors. Doctors ada certain yang common criteria or characteristic, you can put it in the doctors. So daripada tu hospital doctors dengan general practitioners, dia akan inherit attributes yang ada dekat doctors, but with different special characteristic that differentiate the hospital doctor and the general practitioner. Dalam hospital doctors, dia ada 2 jenis lagi. Sama ada dia jadi consultant ataupun team doctor. Dalam team doctor, dia ada 2. Sama ada dia adalah qualified doctor ataupun trainee doctors dan sebagainya. So dalam generalizations hierarchy ni adalah penting untuk object oriented. Supaya kita senang nak manage lah untuk kelas, untuk object sesuatu. So saya pernah come across, saya pernah pergi visit satu company yang ada project dengan Felda. So company tu kita letak internship student kita kat sana. Dia kat Jalan Semarak. Saya tak ingat dah company tu nama apa. But company tu adalah dia punya founder dia adalah daripada graduate daripada not saying graduate lah, lecturers. Dia adalah ex-lecturer daripada UTM. Okay, ex-lecturer daripada UTM space tu. So bila saya pergi ke internship students punya supervision sana, pergi kat sana tengok, saya nampak students tu buat dengan cara yang organize it into MVC, Model View Controller. So bila Model View Controller bermaksud dia organize dia punya coding dia ikut 3 folder yang ada. Model View Controller. Kalau model tu adalah dia adalah semua adalah class diagram dia dalam tu dan sebagainya. So apabila saya tanya, dia memang gunakan generalization tu, bermaksud memang praktis kepada inheritance mechanism tu. So saya pun hairan, setiap students kat situ, internship students kat situ, dia memang gunakan cara sama. Tu yang saya tanya saya interview salah seorang project manager dia. Rupanya project manager dia pun students, pun ex-student UTM. So saya pun tanya, kenapa you ada konsep macam ni? Rupanya dia kata yang founder dia tu, UTM lecturers, adalah mengajar untuk diagram ni. Mengajar memang programming, background dia programming. That's why they emphasize setiap students ataupun setiap employee dalam company tersebut guna pakai konsep macam tu. So saya rasa macam, wow, I really salute that. It's really put the ideal part of the theory into the practical. And when I interview the internship students, saya kata, how do you find it? Dia kata dia sebelum ni, dia buat final year project tu, semua file dia letak kat satu folder sama je. So bila macam tu, dia nak maintain tu jadi susah. Dia tak tahu mana yang bahagian untuk model, bahagian mana untuk view, bahagian mana untuk controller dan sebagainya. So dia kata bila dia pergi internship kat situ, memang practice on the MVC yang ada, dia tahu kalau nak tukar bahagian view saja, folder mana, file mana dia nak refer. Kalau dia nak tukar in terms of model, kat mana folder nak ambil dan sebagainya. So that is actually in practically people use it. I don't know in your company yang ada yang bekerja dan sebagainya. Do you really practice it in your company?
Usually we are using framework atau memang dah MVC lah.
Memang framework lah. Framework gunakan MVC lah. Guna framework apa
Okay, PHP, Laravel.
Okay, memang dah ada framework. PHP, Laravel semualah. Okay. Right. Basically yang itu adalah untuk guna framework lah. Sesiapa yang guna framework bagus, tapi yang sesiapa yang macam students kebanyakan students. So memang saya macam ajar saya punya final year project students pun guna cara, kerana kita emphasize on the coding That's why minta student organize it ikut MVC punya folders dan sebagainya lah. Right? So in terms of ini akan nampak satu arrow tu bermaksud hospital doctors and general practitioners actually inherit something from doctors. That's why arrow dia kena baca lah. Maksudnya we're going to actually, doctors is a super class for the hospital doctor and general practitioners. So and then another terms here is aggregation. Aggregations is more like a part of relationship, meaning that when we have a patient, patients have a patient record, and one patient can have many consultation sessions and so on. Okay, so but if the patient is not exist, maksud patient tu tak ada, maka tak adalah patient record. Okay, contoh kalau consultations tu tak ada, then dia takkan refer kepada any of the patient record dan sebagainya. So bermaksud dia adalah, if the patient is destroyed, maksud you buangkan patient tersebut, maka automatically patient record pun tak ada. So itu nama dia aggregation. Okay. So lastly for today's lectures is actually on the behavioral model. Okay, behavioral model we have two. One is going to actually start with data. Another one is an event based on the trigger by event. Okay, trigger by event. When we trigger by the data, we call it data-driven modeling. Okay, it's basically based on the data processing system. Okay, data processing system is a data-driven modeling. So show the sequence of the actions involved when you process the data from the input data in order to generate a desired output. Okay, for example, this one. This one is the examples of data-driven model. So it's giving some data, okay, in order to have an order process. Okay, in order to have the order process. And this is an activity diagram that represent the process of it. So, and then we have another one, we call it event driven. Okay, kita ada data driven, kita ada event driven. When data driven adalah based on the data from the input to the output. But for the event driven is the response to the external event or the internal event of it. Okay, this is how you're going to have a step diagram. Okay, step diagram in order to represent how the event will going to trigger for the whole process of it. Okay, so in a UML diagram, we have a step machine, okay, step machines model to stimulate, to represent the event trigger process. Okay, so this is one of the step diagram for an embedded system in the microwave. So here showing that step diagram, starting from waiting, sama ada you nak kepada dia display time, waiting for the time, whether you want to set for the full power of the half power. Kalau full power, dia akan setkan full power adalah 600 degree Celsius, satu adalah 300 degree Celsius half power. So bila macam tu 600 power word lah, word kot, yang ni word kot, takkanlah 600 degree. Okay, word, okay, power to the word. So bila you pada full power ataupun half power, dia akan letak kepada timer. Timer allows you to set the time. When you set the time, you want to get the number. When the user enter the number, you're going to actually wait whether you close the door or open the door. When the door is closed, is actually display ready, and you are going to actually start. Okay, start the oven operations. When the door is open, you're going to directly disable. Okay, disable and start waiting for the door to close again and so on. Okay, so this is actually a step diagram. Step diagram adalah more kepada event lah, more kepada event. Dia adalah based on the event. Okay, event yang ada. So supaya kita tahu adalah dia kebanyakan kepada embedded system lah. Kita perlu adalah step diagram yang detail kepada event trigger. Okay, this is detail part of the operational. Operation kat sini dia ada dia ni kan, operation. Okay, operation kat sini, then dia boleh detail part of the operation. Okay, so and then these kinds of model driven engineering, we call it model driven engineering, MDE, is the approach of the software developer. Software developers dia kata, okay, kalau kita ada model, lepas kita dah buat design model, is good that we can actually auto generating language. Contoh kalau sesiapa pernah guna Star UML. Star UML memang very famous daripada dulu lah. Sekarang dah tukar kepada White Star UML. So UML diagram dia ada banyak perspektif dalam tu, and then dia ada banyak diagram dalam tu. If you do it properly in the diagram and so on, it can help to generate the language that you want. Okay, language that you want in the UML tools yang ada. So this one we call it model driven engineering. This is an approach, okay, to software development based on the model. Okay, based on the model. So it will going to actually help in terms of executions of the software by generating the code. So the usage of the model driven, the advantage of it is actually allow the system to be considered in a high level of abstractions and automatically generating code. Honestly lah, automatic generating code memang betul, but most of the code you kena go over again. Maksud, walaupun you dah buat model tersebut, design tersebut, and then you auto generate the code tu you kena go through in detail, sama ada rational ke tak, betul ke tak, before you put into and run it for the enhancement. Siapa pernah guna untuk tools untuk model driven ni? Star UML? White Star UML? Pernah guna tak?
Pernah doktor, pernah.
You sampai ke code dah? You guna sampai ke code ke? Ataupun setakat UML
tak. Nak diagram je. Saya pakai sampai diagram je.
Oh, you tak try untuk kepada coding
Oh tak sampai situ.
Oh, Actually semua UML itu adalah model driven model driven development. Somehow most of the model some of the tools software tools allowed you to have very general code, okay, automatically. But the what we call the code actually sometimes you have to really study the code untuk nak ubah suaikan dia disebabkan dia auto generate the code. Auto generate the code based on the model. Maksud you buat you punya use case diagram, lepas you punya use case diagram, you detail out dalam sequence diagram dan sebagainya untuk activity diagrams. Then after that, bila you pilih kepada platform mana, pilih kepada language apa, dia akan auto generate the code. Bila auto generate the code, somehow you have to study the code in order to understand it before you can modify it. That's why most of the software developers awal-awal tu memang bila benda ni model driven engineering punya tools ni keluar, memang semua happy lah. Dia kira setakat kita dah design model, kita boleh auto generate code. Heaven untuk developers, heaven untuk agile developers especially. Dia hanya buat je model terus keluar coding dan sebagainya. But in reality, when you look at the code, when you download and extract the code and implement it, okay, somehow it needs you to understand the code first before you can modify it. So that's why it's a time consuming untuk belajar, tengok language dia dan sebagainya. But basically that will be a good start lah. Kalau katakan sesiapa yang memang tak ada knowledge untuk ataupun memang jenis yang tak berapa mahir untuk programming, then that will big help. Okay, big help because it's going to auto-generate it. So behind the scene for these kinds of tool, we have architecture. We call it model-driven architecture. Model-driven architectures is a backbone or back end of the tools yang ada. So dia akan guna pakai platform ni, dia akan guna pakai architecture ni. So daripada architecture ni, dia akan ambil domain specific guideline in order to translate it, okay, translate it into the platform independent model. Platform independent model tu adalah biasa kita pada star UML semua, dia akan mula dengan platform independent model, okay, mula dengan PIM ni, platform independent model. Platform independent model tu maksud you hanya keluarkan dalam diagram. Okay, use cases, you spell out betul-betul actors, you spell out betul-betul use case, you spell out betul-betul apa corresponding actors dan sebagainya. Spell out it and you actually do the proper sequence diagram and so on. So this is actually platform independent. So that means you come out dengan design yang ada je. Lepas tu baru you pilih mana yang you specifically nak pilih. Sama ada nak convert dia kepada Java, sama ada nak convert dia kepada C#, sama ada you nak convert dia kepada C dan sebagainya. So that will be the platform specific model. So dia akan ambil daripada syntax tree dia, daripada dia punya syntactic trees dia dan sebagainya, and then dia punya language format dia dan sebagainya, try to generate the code yang ada. So ini adalah examples dia. Daripada platform independent model tu, PIM tu, daripada diagram, you boleh pilih sama ada you nak kepada J2EE translator ataupun .NET translator. In this case bila kepada J2EE translator, dia akan kepada Java code generator. Keluar Java program, keluar C# program dan sebagainya. So this is actually that is a back end of it. Masuk kat belakang lah. Kat belakang tu apa yang you boleh guna. Ini adalah tools yang ada yang boleh guna tools yang so far boleh untuk guna free lah setakat yang saya semak. Enterprise architecture, U model, okay. So selain daripada star UML memang dah famous lah. Star UML ini adalah choice dia lah. Okay, selain daripada star UML yang yang terbaru adalah white star UML. So ini adalah another choice that you boleh guna. Then these tools actually built based on the concept of model driven architecture. Maksud dia based on this concept. Okay, based on this concept. Okay, maksud dia ambil model, So pilih platform yang mana, lepas tu dia akan generate coding yang ada. So ini adalah back end dia, so architecture dia lah, architecture dia. So I think that's all for today. Okay, itu saja. So ada apa-apa soalan tak?
Doktor, just nak tanyalah untuk RE ni macam elicitation dengan analysis, practically dia jalan serentak ke or dia sequence?
Can I come again?
For the requirement elicitation and analysis, practically is it good for it to run parallel or sequence?
Okay.
Sequential.
It's based on the project lah. Based on the project. So as I mentioned to you, certain software house sekarang, dia akan beritahu dia akan buat gunakan agile. Okay, dia gunakan agile. Bila gunakan agile, okay, and then gunakan incremental development punya approach. Okay, bermaksud dia akan buat sikit-sikit. Buat sikit, dia akan verify dengan user akan beritahu feedback and then dia akan buat balik dan sebagainya. So apabila macam tu, dia akan tak ada clear cut of the requirements tau. So that's why akan jadikan satu project tu drag kalau you tak manage it well. Okay. Kalau kebanyakan melibatkan government agency, biasa dia akan gunakan ada certain point tu adalah requirement sign off. Bermaksud dia kena sampai satu tahap adalah buat requirement review dah habis, dia masih menerima changes tapi changes in terms of requirements ya. So bermaksud dia verified sampai satu tahap yang requirement dah verified by the user, verifications by the user, dah validate, dah ada requirement check dan sebagainya. Dia akan minta client untuk sign off. Sign off meaning that they were going to actually have checking by several stakeholders and dia dah agree kata okay basically ini adalah functions and requirement yang kita orang nak buat, then dia akan kick off project. So it depends on the project Nazim. It depends on the project and the company practices. Okay, maybe yang lain tu ada practice lain yang boleh share? My Sarah?
Macam mana doktor?
Nazim punya soalan, dia kata ada tak requirements tu boleh buat sekali dengan verifications ataupun check dan sebagainya?
Tu depends pada yang developer juga. Kalau dia orang rasa selesa untuk kira dia orang boleh manage untuk buat serentak, so dia orang akan buat. Tak ada restriction.
Based on the company punya practice lah. It's based on the company punya practice. Adalah certain company dia tak akan dia akan kepada clear review semua requirements dulu sebelum dia pass documentations kepada development team. It's based on the company lah and then the development team juga. The practice of the company lah. Dia tak ada satu standards tu, Nazim. Is that answering your questions?
Quite be lah because usually when they gather the requirement, the analysis, the elicitation just run at the same time because if they are run in sequential procedure then it will be a headache lah.
Okay, bermaksud dia elicitation tu gathering. Lepas tu apabila you gather, bagi saya lah, apabila you gather macam mana you jumpa dengan klien, you gather the requirements. Waktu tu you tak boleh nak buat analisis lagi. Kalau you klien tu seorang, okay. Kalau you klien tu dalam tu stakeholder tu ramai. Stakeholders tu ramai. Bermaksud dia ada manager dia ada receptionist dia, lepas tu dia ada human resource manager dia dan sebagainya. So there is a lot of stakeholders. You akan gather the requirement. After gathering the requirement, you akan kena buat analysis. kena buat analisis. So that's why it depends on the scenario yang ada. Kalau you ada very small applications, melibatkan you punya client tu, stakeholder dia seorang je, maksud dia je yang perlu say yes, dia je bagi requirement, dia yang everything. So it's easier. Maksud daripada dia dapat boleh buat analisis terus dapat balik kat dia dan sebagainya. But if you have few stakeholders yang ada yang you perlu interview, you tak boleh buat concurrently. You kena buat by sequence juga. Maksud you habis satu round untuk interview semua, baru you buat untuk analisis. Lepas tu habis analisis, you dah buat cluster untuk function dan sebagainya, baru you akan gatherkan untuk users tu ataupun clients tu untuk verify balik. Benda ni, function ni adalah macam mana, function ni adalah macam mana. So that's why it depends on the project lah, project nature. Okay, yang lain? Haziq, any questions?
Tak ada lagi. Okey je.
Alright. So, you dah mula baca belum Nak tanya, you dah mula baca untuk assessment 1 belum? Assessment 1 lambat lagi untuk nak hantar, tapi kena mula baca dah Saya dah set dalam you future tau. Saya dah set dalam you future. You have to submit through you future. Okay, you have to submit your assignment through you future. So I already open it. I already open for submission. So the deadline for you to submit, if I'm not mistaken, is on the 22nd.
Yes, Doctor.
On the 22nd of November. Okay, 22nd of November. Maka you kena submit lah. Bila you dah siap dan sebagainya, you submit it. Okay. So basically, you dah master's level, kena tahu jugalah untuk guna pakai online database yang offer dari UiTM tu. Online database offer by UiTM. And then you daripada luar, you hanya enter your username will be your matrix number and IC will be your password. So enter it, you can actually download paper free, especially IEEE, ACM dan sebagainya, Science Direct. So benda-benda macam ni kalau you access gunakan Google Scholar dan sebagainya kat luar, ada paper yang you kena bayar. So you should learn how to do it. Itu yang saya tanya, you dah pandai nak buat ke?
Pandai betul, pandai.
Pandai
Boleh.
lah. Okay.
Itu ada yang ajar saya.
Siapa ajar?
Briefing hari tu.
Masa
briefing itu ada.
Okay, alright. Itu adalah Haziq, itu adalah online database daripada PITA ke?
Pita.
Okay, Alhamdulillah. So that is a way that you gunakan keywords lah. Saya semalam dah try dah gunakan keywords, requirement engineering, plus dengan mobile application development. There is quite the numbers of papers that really interesting untuk nak baca. So and then kalau you boleh dapat few papers tersebut, insyaAllah you boleh come out dengan buat assignment ni dengan impactful lah. Maksud you akan dapat markah yang agak tinggi lah untuk assignment ni. So cuma gunakan keywords lah, requirement engineering plus dengan mobile application development. Maka you akan dapat lah semua isu-isu challenges when you have requirement elicitations, doing the mobile application development dan sebagainya. Okay So anything else to ask before we end out the class?
Doctor, we just need to upload the file or we need to type into the text area?
Upload the file, Nazim. You just have to upload the file. Saya dah set satu soalan. Macam soalan suruh you letak file lah. Kalau you katakan you nak letak sedikit teks you hanya beritahu adalah this is your assignment, then attach a file. That's it. Saya akan baca daripada situlah.
Okay, Doktor.
Tak payah type kat situ. Hanya kalau saya memang akan prepare satu short answer punya tempat. So you type something je lah. Katakan this is an attached file for the assessment 1. That's it. So you attachkan satu file, hantar. Attachkan you punya file lah. File tu dalam Word lah. File tu dalam Word format. Document format. So that saya boleh marking kat situ. Marking dengan type comment kat situ untuk marking. Is that clear?
Yes,
Clear,
Doktor.
Doktor?
Okay, right. Okay, last please write down your name. Kadang-kadang you orang tak log in daripada YouFuture That's why please write down your name. For those yang tak write down lagi, please write down your name. So I will going to double check your attendance. Okay. Remember to write.
Doktor,
Yes, Kana.
assignment 1 tu untuk soalan requirement engineering process dengan mobile application development tu kena based on artikel juga ke? Soalan
Yes,
satu.
kena based on article. Kena
Okay.
based on articles, okay?
Okay, Doktor.
Right. Bermasuk artikel so kena pandai baca lah. Kerana ada artikel yang bahagian artikel so yang relevant dengan you punya area tu hanya sebahagian je. That's why quickly skim through. Tajuk paling penting kena relevant first round. Apabila tajuk relevant you download dulu. Download dulu. The second step baca abstract dia. Abstract dia berkaitan tak? Kalau tak berkaitan filter out. Tak payah baca. Kalau berkaitan then bermasuk paper tu relevant. Apabila paper tu relevant baca. Senang tak English dia nak faham? Kalau senang English dia nak faham teruskan. Kalau katakan English dia pelik-pelik, you pun tak faham baca berapa kali nak tertidur, terlentuk dan sebagainya, put aside. Jangan baca paper tu. Okay, so daripada English yang senang tu, screen through. Ada bahagian yang you nak highlight it. Okay, highlight it. So apabila bahagian yang you nak tu you highlight, katakan you nak copy and paste boleh tak? Boleh, tak ada masalah. But paraphrase nanti. Copy and paste, buat citation. Okay, copy and paste, buat citation. So bahagian yang you nak tu you dah ambil dah. So you can put aside that paper. But remember to cite lah. Kalau tak nanti you lupa you daripada mana ambil paper tu. Same thing go through for other papers. Apabila macam tu content dah ada. Cuba untuk susunkan ikut tajuk, ikut isu. Ini adalah isu tentang let's say adalah isu berkaitan dengan communication related. So buatkan satu isu. Ini adalah berkaitan dengan human factors punya isu. Longgokkan ini adalah human factors issue. Bermaksud apabila macam tu baru you boleh olah. Requirement engineering, elicitations dalam mobile application development terbahagi kepada let's say 5 factors yang ada. Ada 5 isu yang ada. Isu yang paling utama berkaitan dengan human factors related issue. So you terangkanlah dalam human factors related issue ada isu apa. Okay, isu yang pertama adalah daripada paper ni, isu yang kedua daripada paper ni, terangkan. Okay, daripada tu. So bermaksud human factors you refer kepada let's say 2 paper. Tulis kat situ lah you refer kepada 2 papers, ini adalah human factors ya. Kalau katakan satu lagi adalah berkaitan dengan scope related. Scope related you refer kepada 3 paper. Masa you summarize, jadikan satu paragraph and then you refer kepada 3 papers yang ada. So this is how you're going to write a impactful and papers lah dan articles. Cara yang sama juga you akan guna pakai untuk you buat manuskrip lain ataupun assignment lain. Can you understand it? Boleh ke?
Boleh, Doktor.
Okay, right. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you very much and hope to see you again.